Hello friends, and welcome back to another episode of Spilling Studio. My name is Sam, and this week we have 7 new ARE practice questions designed to help you pass your next exam. There's 1 question per exam topic and a bonus question at the end, so stick around. Starting us off is practice management. A university client would like to directly hire sub-consultants they previously worked with on their glass classroom building. The architect prefers to hire the engineers directly, but the client insists they hire the consultants. How should the architect coordinate with the consultants? Before beginning the work, establish clear lines of communication. Send the owner progress drawings on a weekly basis for distribution to the consultants. Have the consultants attend design meetings during schematic design. Require the consultants to send check sets before each deliverable. Feel free to pause here to answer. The answer is, before beginning work, establish clear lines of communication. The best option given is to establish clear lines of communication prior to starting work. Options C and D are components of clear communication, so they're right, but not the best choice since option A is all-encompassing. And option B, having the owner send out progress drawings, is not the owner's responsibility. As part of the architect's basic scope of services in B101, the architect is responsible for coordinating their services with the services provided by the owner and the owner's consultants. It's also not the architect's responsibility to assess the accuracy, completeness, or timeliness of the information provided by the owner's consultants. However, if the architect notices something, they must provide prompt written notice to the owner. Now on to project management. A city is looking to finance some public improvements to a neighborhood just east of the central business area. The goal is to encourage private development. What should the city use to achieve this goal? Obligation bonds, development impact fees, business improvement districts, or tax increment financing? Pause here to answer. And the answer is tax increment financing. Let's go through our wrong answers first. A general obligation bond is issued by a municipality to fund a specific public capital facility such as a school, fire station, library, or other types of public facilities. Property tax is used to pay off these bonds, so taxpayers in that jurisdiction vote on whether or not they want to build the public facility. Development impact fees are imposed on developers to pay for improvements of infrastructure that is not on their project site, like a wastewater treatment plant, but that is necessary to support their project. Business improvement districts are fees that are applied to a certain area to fund public space improvements like parks and streetscapes. The goal is to keep these areas looking nice so that property values increase. That does it for our incorrect answers. Now on to our correct answer, tax increment financing. Cities use tax increment financing to pay for improvements that will attract private developers and generate increased taxes due to increased property values. Crazy, right? So how this works is that a city will choose an extra area or district to make public improvements. Property values are assessed, and then the tax rate at that value is frozen for a time period set in the development plan. Then the local government issues bonds to finance infrastructure improvements and development projects within that district. As development occurs, property values increase and so does the tax. Instead of this tax money going back to the general city fund, it stays within that district and is used to repay the bonds that were issued. Once the designated time period is over and debts are repaid, which is usually 10 to 30 years, the increased tax revenue goes back to the general fund of the local government. Now on to programming and analysis. An architect was recently hired to design a new elementary school for an up-and-coming suburban area. The project is currently in the programming stage, and the architect is preparing a cost evaluation for the project. This architect has designed multiple elementary schools in the past and is using that experience to base the estimate on. Which of the following is a known factor that will add cost to the project? Add alternate, allowance, contingency, premium. Pause to answer. And the correct answer is premium. A premium is something that is abnormal. It's something that would be different from a typical base model or a typical elementary school in this question. So this would be something like a short construction period, different contractual terms like extra insurance, difficult site conditions, or odd or special program needs. Anything that varies from a typical building, or elementary school in this case, would be considered a premium that would certainly add cost. A contingency is used for unknowns in the project and may not be used at all if the owner is lucky. This is typically a set percentage number based on the project's size and complexity, and since it is a standard in even the earliest stages of estimating, it would not be considered an add to the project. An allowance is a set amount of money estimated to cover a particular material or piece of equipment. It's used when the cost of an item is not known and can only be determined once bids come in. So an allowance may not necessarily be a project add. And finally, an add alternate is in the same boat as an allowance. It may or may not be a cost add to the project. Add alternates allow flexibility during the bidding stage. If the bid price comes in higher than the budget, then one or more of the deduct alternates can be used to bring the price back down. If the bid is less than the budget, then one or more of the add alternates can be included to improve the quality of the project while staying on budget. Next up is project planning. Which of the following spaces should be acoustically dead? Select 3 that apply. Podcast studio, concert hall, lecture hall, conference room, opera house. Pause to answer. And the correct answer is podcast studio, lecture hall, and conference room. Dead space sounds awful, doesn't it? We're never trying to design for that, but it's not bad at all when it comes to acoustics. It just means that these areas are meant to highlight the spoken word, so just one person talking. These spaces have short reverberation times since they absorb most of the sound energy and have minimal sound reflection. Some acoustic deadening materials are sound-absorbing panels, foam, fabric, and special acoustic tiles. A concert hall and an opera house are best in live spaces because they are musical performances which typically sound best in areas with long reverberation times. These spaces reflect a significant amount of sound energy and give a sense of spaciousness and resonance. As you can imagine, the best materials for live areas are mostly hard, so sound can bounce off of them. So materials like concrete, glass, and polished wood. A quick pause here to remind you that I post new questions every week, so please hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on a video. It also really helps me out, so thank you. Moving on to project development. An architect is working on a CMU masonry wall detail for a new shopping center. As stated in most building codes, at what spacing should the horizontal reinforcement be at? 6 inches, 8 inches, 16 inches, 24 inches, or 36 inches? Pause to answer. And the answer is 16 inches. Most building codes require horizontal reinforcement in brick and concrete masonry walls to be at a minimum of 16 inches on center, which means there needs to be horizontal reinforcement every 16 inches. There are different types of reinforcing that can be used, like a continuous truss or a ladder type that is laid in the mortar joints. Including horizontal reinforcement is essential for structural integrity and resisting lateral loads like wind and seismic forces. It allows the wall to distribute the lateral loads evenly, which strengthens it against bending and shear forces. Horizontal reinforcement also helps prevent cracking in the walls since it provides tensile strength. Next is construction evaluation. The construction of a new apartment complex is 95% complete. During a routine inspection, the code inspector tells the contractor that 3 no parking signs need to be installed in addition to the 4 signs already shown on the plans. What should the architect issue to make this change? Architect's supplemental instructions, addendum, change order, as-built, or construction change directive? Pause here to answer. The answer is change order. Yes, the classic change order. Since this is a code or AHJ requirement, this change needs to happen. And since the change was not initiated by the architect, it would not be an ASI or Architect Supplemental Instruction. It's also not an addendum, since addendums are issued before construction starts. And the opposite of that is as-built. As-built are drawings of what was actually constructed, so they're issued once construction is complete. And finally, the question doesn't mention a conflict between the owner and the contractor, so a construction change directive would not apply to this scenario. And finally, our bonus question is, a client recently finished construction on their new 2-story home. They initially did not have landscaping as part of the project. Now that their home has been completed, they have funds left over to develop the landscape. Which configuration will be the most effective at windbreak? See the site section below. Configuration A, B, C, or D? Pause here to answer. And the correct answer is configuration D. Believe it or not, trees can affect the microclimate of a site. And the best configuration is a set of trees that are approximately the same height. There are several factors that impact the effectiveness of windbreak, like wind speed, direction, terrain, and the characteristics of the trees themselves. But a few things us designers can do are plant multiple rows with trees staggered instead of aligned, planting a mix of species since different types of trees have different growth habits, root structures, and leaf shapes that will collectively provide better protection against wind. It's also best to plant trees that are tall since wind gets stronger as you move up away from the ground. And you want density, so you want the trees to be close together, but not too close where they're competing for resources. We want them to thrive. That wraps up our questions for this week. Remember to check out the descriptions to links to some of the AIA contracts covered in this video. I've also linked some of my favorite study books, so go check those out. Let me know in the comments what subject areas you're struggling with, and I'll do my best to cover it in the next video. Thank you all for joining, please subscribe, and good luck on your next exam. You got this!